Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Tactical Traveler. I am so excited. Today, I'm going to be interviewing Tamara Bee. She has been traveling the world solo for the last 30 years. She's been to 76 countries. She uses mostly public transport and hitchhiking. She's had some really epic and amazing trips. As I was just talking with her before we started recording, one of the things that I'm most interested to hear about is her first trip starting in Africa. Tamara, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on. How are you doing today?
Well, thanks so much for having me, John. I am okay. A little bit frustrated up here in Ontario, Canada with our third lockdown, but besides that, all good.
Yeah, these lockdowns are really cramping my travel style for sure.
No doubt. I know. I'm so glad I went to Central America for a month. I got back March 4th, so 2 weeks before our first lockdown. So I'm so happy I got that trip in at least.
Yeah, right. So I want to just kind of start with this, and then I'm going to lead it into your trip to Africa. Why? I mean, there's so many things that are intriguing about your story and the things that you've done. But why? Why are you doing this? What's the reason for you to do all these crazy adventures and do them by yourself?
Well, I guess it'd be why the hell not, really?
Good answer. I like
yeah,
that one.
yeah. Well, I mean, the first trip. So remember, this is back in 1993 as well. So I did this 30,000-mile overland trip without modern tech, without the internet, without cell phones, ATMs even, you know what I mean? It's traveler's checks and no Google Maps, anything like that. So it was literally, you're on your own. And I just kind of winged the whole trip, really. And it was my first backpacking trip as well. However, it wasn't my idea at all. So it was like the summer of 92. I was saving up money. I was working two different jobs. And my plan was, I didn't know if it existed or not, but I was going to make it up if it didn't. I was going to go to the Caribbean and yacht hitch or yacht hop. Right. So that was my plan, very civilized. And then one of the bars I was working at, I was a bartender, a friend of mine from high school, who I hadn't seen for like 4 or 5 years. He came in and he's like, "Hey, Tam, how are you doing? What are you up to?" I was like, "Oh, I'm taking another year out of university," and, told him my plan about going to the Caribbean to yacht hitch. And he's like, "Oh, I'm doing that. Well, I'm taking another year out too, but I want to go from Paris to Cape Town by land, or water. So completely overland." I was like, "Well, that sounds crazy." And
Yeah.
he's like, "Well, I think you should come with me." I went, "Well, I think you're wrong." That's no way, Jose. And he's like, "Well, let's just meet up for lunch and catch up and, in a week or so." I'm like, "Okay." So I do that. And of course, he's like really on me. He's like, "Really, you should come. You should come." And I'm like, "Casey, I don't want to go. I don't want to do that." And he's like, "Listen, I've got this book, Lonely Planet, Africa on a Shoestring." And it was like about 3 inches thick. I think it was the only guidebook out at the time for Africa. He's like, "Just borrow this, read it, and then get back to me in a couple of weeks." And I was like, literally just to shut him up, I took it. Well, of course, I'm reading through it. I'm like, "Wow, that sounds amazing. Wow, that sounds really interesting." So about 2 weeks later, I call him back and I'm like, "Okay, so when are you planning on leaving for this trip?" He's like, "Well, December." I was like, "Okay, listen, I won't have enough money until January." So January 93. "If you want to wait for me, I'll come." And he's like, "Of course I'll wait for you." And that was it. I ended up leaving 6 weeks later. We flew so I only did 2 flights, my flight from Toronto to Paris. And then my flight 16 months later, I flew from Nairobi to England. So my 6-month trip that I planned going to the Caribbean turned into this crazy 30,000-mile trip from Paris to Cape Town. And then I hitched back to Nairobi by myself. And then I flew to England and I ended up living in England for 22 years, or just over 20 years. So so that 6-month trip turned into 22 years. And then, and Casey, like we parted ways after 5 months. He was like, "This is too hard. I'm going to go to England and live there for a year and then come back and finish it from
So
Nairobi."
he quit.
He quit on me. which is fine. Like I was kind of ready to do like to split, like to go our own ways anyways. But he was like, then I'll spend a year in England, then I'll fly back to Nairobi and go, continue to Cape Town. So it still counts as doing it. I was like, are you crazy? No, it doesn't. I did it. It took me a year to get from Paris to Cape Town by land. But you cannot say you did it because you had a year break. So I think that's fair enough, to be honest.
Right?
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the journey from Paris to Cape Town, some notable experiences or stops, and really, so, you started accidentally, like it wasn't really planned, but you continued. You didn't stop after that. So tell me a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, sure. So, thinking like he's been planning this trip for, a year or so, I thought that he would have like Europe kind of sorted. Like, he only had the guidebook for Africa. And remember, before the internet, you can just Google stuff and look things up, right? So we really didn't know how we were going to get to Africa. And he had no guidebook for Europe. So we literally had to walk around, like our first morning in Paris, we walked around for 4 hours to try and find a cheap place to stay. In January, in the cold, with our, backpacks. My pack, I had like sleeping bag and cooking stove and clothes for the cold, clothes for the the heat. So the backpack weighed about, 30, 40 pounds. Yeah, 40 pounds probably. It's not light. And then, so we kind of went through Europe. So we went through like France, Italy, Greece, and then we couldn't figure out how we're going to get to Africa because it's in the winter. So a lot of the ferries were not running basically. So we ended up going to a few of the Greek islands and then into Turkey. And we thought, okay, well, we can go, from Turkey, we should be able to get, to Africa. Well, again, I had to go into a travel agent to look at a world map to figure out where the hell we were.
Right.
We're going to get across. So I'm like, we could maybe go through Lebanon, through Israel into Egypt. But then again, I knew that I didn't want to have Israeli stamps in my passport because I was going to Sudan, which was Islam fundamentalist. And you can't, most Muslim countries, even back then, you couldn't have an Israeli stamp. So I was like, I don't know if I should do that. But anyway, so I called the Lebanese embassy and I was like, hi, we're 2 Canadians. Just wondering if we can come through Lebanon and if we need a visa. He's like, madam, there is a war going on. I was like, oh, so that's a no? He's like, yes. I'm like, okay, well, sorry about your war. The next country over. So the next country was Syria.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I found the Syrian embassy. I'm like, hi, 2 Canadians want to come to Syria. Is that possible? They're like, oh, yes, of course. So I was like, okay, do I need to get a visa before I come or can I get one at the border? Oh, yeah, you can get one at the border, no problem. And then he closed it by, have a lovely picnic in Syria. I was like, okay, awesome. So we go right along the Turkish coast, which is beautiful, by the way. And, it's days to get there, right? And we finally get to the Syrian border and, by like 2 different pickup trucks and the back of pickup trucks and really bad roads and everything, get to the Syrian border. Where's your visa? Oh, well, I just spoke to a guy at the Syrian embassy. He said I can get one here. No, not possible. You have to go to Ankara, Ankara, Turkey, which is North Turkey, 12 hours away. I was like, oh my God. Yeah. And this was us, actually, I forgot. We also went to Cyprus before this we thought we could get the ferry from Cyprus to Alexandria in Egypt. So we did that, but because we were on the Turkish side of the Cyprus, the ferries weren't running from that side. They're only running from the Greek side. So as we went to cross over to the Greek side of Cyprus, they're like, no, not possible. You have a Turkish stamp. We're not letting you in. And that's the only way the ferry. So we had to go back to Turkey. So I forgot that little bit before. So it's just like, oh, are we ever going to get to Africa? But yeah, so we had to do this 12-hour, ridiculously long bus journey to Ankara. Of course, we got there Friday night. Embassies are closed all weekend.
Right.
Yep. So had to wait the weekend out. Monday, finally got our visa, and then get back on that bus, another 12 hours to the border, and we got in. So that was, that was great. And I'm now looking back, obviously, I wish I would have spent more time in Syria, actually, because we're only there for a couple of days in Damascus, which was such a beautiful city, just amazing, and the nicest people. And it's so sad what's happened to it over the last 10 years. So much the
Right.
country's been destroyed. Yeah, it's heartbreaking, really, because they're just the nicest people. Like, I found that I've been to a lot of Middle Eastern countries and a lot on my own. And I really, the hospitality I've received is just ridiculous. They're such generous, kind people. Amazing. Like, I've been invited into so many homes and had so many meals and even slept in their homes,
Right.
without even sometimes being able to speak the same language, So just great people. But
Yeah, they really are.
Yeah, finally got into Jordan, and then from Jordan we went into Sinai, Egypt, and finally got into Africa. So that was amazing.
Yeah,
Took us
people
3
don't
months.
realize how much travel has changed.
Oh God, yeah.
From the early 90s, which you and I are a little bit older, so
Yeah,
we understand that, to where now with cell phones and smartphones and the internet,
yeah,
that there's instant access to information. And I mean, I was 17,000 feet on Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa, and my cell phone rang. You know, like, my first international trip was very similar to the experience that you're talking about, where you're getting conflicting information. It's difficult to piece together, especially when you go to third world countries.
yeah.
And to be able to piece all that together and then to get to Africa is amazing. How long did that take you from departure from Canada to actually stepping foot into Africa?
I think it was about 3 months.
3 months.
Yeah, 2.5. Yeah, I think it was around 2.5. Yeah, 2.5. 3
So
months.
what drove you?
Well, just to get to bloody Africa.
Right, but me. I mean, you quit when it didn't work out the way you thought.
It was frustrating.
Yeah.
Like with that, because like I said, the Cyprus thing first happened, and that cost money. Like, we're on a tight budget, right? Because I was on such a long trip.
Right.
So ideally, I mean, I knew Europe, we knew Europe was going to be more expensive. So, I planned for that. But all these, like, going to Cyprus back and forth, it was at the time, it was like $25 just departure tax plus ferry costs plus, you know what I mean? So it added up. And then that same thing with going back to Ankara, that wasted 12 hours each way bus journey and then a weekend. So, 4 days just for nonsense. Because I listened to a guy at an embassy who you'd think would know what was happening. And then also the next kind of frustrating thing was then we had to wait for our Sudanese visa. So we applied in Cairo, and I met other travelers who didn't even get it. You know what I mean? So it wasn't a for sure thing to get your Sudanese visa. And they would just go, oh, we'll come back next week. Well, I'm not going to hang out in Cairo for weeks on end. I mean, I love Cairo, and I was actually there during Ramadan. So it was pretty cool because I met a really nice local guy who invited me to, like, they have their breakfast at 6 p.m. And so he invited me to eat with his family breakfast outside their shop. So what would happen is, like, all the stores would close, the shutters would come down, and then they just roll mats on the sidewalk, and all the food would come out, and you just sit on a mat on the sidewalk and share food. It was awesome. So because I had to keep going back to Cairo, I'd go out to see Oasis, which is amazing, and then I'd go down to Luxor, and then I'd have to come back to Cairo. So I think I went to Cairo about 4 times waiting for this Sudanese visa, which took about 3 weeks to get, I think. But once we got that was really cool. So I kind of I managed to follow the Nile all the way down to Khartoum, where it, diverges. The Blue Nile comes from Ethiopia, and the White Nile comes up from Uganda. And I end up going to both Blue Nile Falls and Murchison Falls, the White Nile Falls in Uganda. Wow. So the Nile is the longest river in the world too. So besides the South, the South Sudan, because again they were in war, which I don't know if there's still a war, but the war between North and South Sudan went on for a long time. So you couldn't go any further south than Khartoum at the time, which is fine because 3 weeks, over 3 weeks in Sudan was enough for me. It was very
Right.
hot. Yeah, I think that's the hottest I've ever been. It was like the hottest day was 49 Celsius. No, sorry,
49.
59 Celsius. Sorry.
59 Celsius.
Yeah.
So what
I don't
is
even know
that?
what that is
That's
in Fahrenheit.
yeah. So hold on. Let me look. What is that in Fahrenheit?
That'd be about like 140 or something.
What?
Yeah.
138? Oh
There you
my
go.
God.
Yeah,
138.
it was like living in a sauna in Khartoum.
Right.
Literally.
I was just in Death Valley in August of last year, and it was 124.
Yeah.
So this is, 14 degrees more than that. Yeah. And it literally, as you breathe, felt like, burning your lungs.
Yeah. Yeah. And our hotel room didn't even have a fan, let alone AC.
Oh my God.
So this is how I'd have to try and get sleep. Is
Right.
I had like some silk boxer shorts and like a tank top, and it was showers down the hallway, which weren't that clean either. Cockroaches would be skittering around between your feet when you're in the showers. Lovely. And I would just wear my clothes, and those little travel towels. I'd soak that. So then I'd go lie into bed fully wet with the travel towel over my face and try and rush to fall asleep. And then wake up 3 hours later, bone dry, and repeat. I would do that 3 or 4 times a night. So much fun.
So I was in a country, another third world country, and they actually had an electricity outlet in the shower.
That's sensible.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, how bad do I stink? How bad do I need to bathe? Versus taking my chances with that.
Oh, well, in India, they are just masters of electricity. Like they steal electricity, like the homes from the main wires all the time. So yeah, in India, like you'll have wires hanging through the shower.
Right. Oh God.
Yeah,
crazy.
A lot. Like I've spent 3.5 years in India. I lived there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, on and off. I traveled 3.5 years, so I know India quite well, and yeah, that happens all the time, and it's scary. Yeah, you don't shower nearly as much when you're on the road,
right?
Than you do at home, especially back then, like in Africa as well. Like you got the bucket showers,
and
you're lucky if you got it if it was warm or hot water. A lot of the times it's cold water, and all that means is you literally just get a bucket of water with a little cup. And sent to like an empty kind of shower room, but without the shower head.
Yep.
Yeah, that was it.
I've told people that my time in the military and learning how to do wet wipe showers has become very useful as I've been to some crazy places around the world. But I think, and probably Canada is similar. In the United States, they simply do not comprehend how fortunate we are. They, running water, clean bathrooms. The vast majority of, I think, Americans and Canadians would not have to worry about showering with cockroaches going through their feet. We definitely, I know Canada and I know most of America doesn't have to worry about 138 degrees without AC. I think that having those kind of experiences really creates an appreciation for everything that we do have. I mean, man, 138 degrees without air conditioning.
Not even a fan.
Yeah.
I don't think a fan would do anything. It'd be more like a hairdryer, but
you're right. Like all that would do is circulate,
move the hot air. Yeah. That did include humidity. So it wasn't a dry heat. It was a humid heat, right? So that was with humidity. It was 59. I mean, Canada, Ontario, where I'm from, it gets hot here in the summer. I mean, we hit 40 plus quite often.
Really?
Oh yeah. Like, and it's very humid in Ontario as well. So, it's hot here. It's crazy. Like we can go from like this summer, I don't know if we hit minus 40 this summer, but we hit probably minus 30 Celsius this winter. And then, 5-6 months later, we can be plus 40. It's crazy. That's why Canadians are a hardy bunch, I think.
Yeah. I mean, 144 degrees, which is what that is in Fahrenheit, is that's what it is here in Tennessee. They're getting the hundreds with, damn near 100% humidity.
Yeah.
So, it can get pretty muggy.
Yeah. And plus, then you get dehydrated really quickly too, right? Because you're sweating so much.
Right.
And when you don't have a good water supply, like I got, and that's one thing when I've traveled throughout, but especially Africa, because that was my first ever backpacking trip. Like talk about, jumping into the deep end. To this day, it's my hardest, my longest, but probably most rewarding trip I've ever done. So in a way, I'm glad I did do that first, because every trip since, and I've done some, hard trips or long trips, but nothing compares to the African trip in how hard it was.
Yeah. So let me revisit that for just a second.
Mm-hmm.
So you had all these difficulties, that guy bailed on you, not a ton of like information just because of the time that you were in. So when you dealt with those complexities and those frustrations, what kept you traveling? I mean, how many miles did you say you did again?
So I think it's around, 30,000 miles, but that doesn't include the 2 flights I did. And then also that doesn't include, all the miles I covered when I was in a place walking, like Kilimanjaro, that was
right.
Like, I think I probably walked 90, because I went 6 days. So an extra, I think it was something like 85 kilometers, like the 6-day hike for Kili, which right? Yeah. So, so it was about 30,000 miles from place to place kind of thing.
Yeah.
What kept me going? Well, and this is funny because when we were when I was in Sudan, Eritrea, and Ethiopia, those 2 months, we met maybe 6 other travelers. That's it. In 2 months. Now you think about now when you go to say Thailand or Mexico, how many other tourist travelers do you meet? Thousands.
Yeah.
We met 6 in 2 months. So because I went off the beaten path per se, a lot in Africa, I would go quite weeks, if not months, without meeting very many other travelers, let's say. And it was quite funny because, especially when I was on my own, that I would meet people. So you meet people wherever, right? And you start talking to them, and you don't say your name right away. And then people will go, oh, then we say, oh, by the way, what's your name? And I'd say, oh, it's Tamara. Well, I don't know how many times this happened to me, but every single one of them would go, oh my God, you're the crazy Canadian chick we've heard about.
Oh, wow.
Because I guess I got quite a reputation, because not many people did what I did, like came from Europe.
Sure.
And went down to South Africa and then deciding to hitch back up to Nairobi. So, and I met a few guys who did it, but they had their own vehicles and they were guys. I didn't meet another girl that had done it.
Sure.
So it was always meant as a compliment, you know what I mean? I think,
right.
Anyways. But yeah, so, it was the reason why I kept going was because I had a mission. My mission was to get to Cape Town. And I wasn't going to let anything really stop me, And Casey, there was a couple of times. Well, it was one time we were in North Sudan, just crossed into Egypt. We had a nightmare about this train, and oh my God! And he was like, "Well, I think we should just fly from here to Nairobi." I'm like, "Casey, this is your trip to go by land. We are not flying." Stick it out. And it was one of the worst finally when the train came, it was one of the worst train rides in my life, and by far the longest. I think it was 56 hours or something on a train with no window panes through the desert. So you were so filthy, and then the water tanks ran out of water after 12 hours. So
my God.
Yeah, they would stop. They do all their little stops, and then all these little kids would run out with little tiny, the little, when you bring a bucket and spade to the beach, our kids, they run out with these little buckets of water that they just dipped into the Nile, which is not the cleanest water.
Right.
and you just have to buy like for 1 penny or 2 cents or something like that, but like this water from them. And luckily I had my uncle thankfully gave me this really cool, remember back in 93, but this really little cup in a cup water filter which cleaned like everything, it killed everything. So it would take time because you'd have to pour the one bit into the other cup and then pour it into my water bottle, but it saved my life a million times for sure. So
Right.
but yeah, so that was fun. That was a fun train ride. But yeah, like I said, finally did it. And I'm just stubborn and I wanted to get to Cape Town. You know, that's why I kept going, basically.
That's cool. That's cool. So 76 countries. I'm going to double this up. Mm-hmm. What would you say is your most interesting food you've ever ate? And then what's your favorite food that you've ate?
Oh my gosh, there's so many choices. And I stopped eating red meat when I was 19 as well. So before I started traveling, I had to make some exceptions, obviously, along the way.
Sure.
But, I don't know about the most. Well, there's a restaurant in Nairobi called Carnivores, and it's kind of like a buffet. Well, yeah, kind of like you basically pay a price and eat as much as you want, right?
Right.
But this is unique because you'd sit at your table. I mean, you'd help yourself to all the salads and things like that, right? And sides. But the meat, the waiters come around with these metal stakes, like spears pretty much, with roasts on them with the machete.
Nice.
And there's 40 different roasts at it, like per day. Right. And then you just say, they go 1 slice or 2. And they literally just slice the meat onto your plate with their machete and all the different roast rotate. So I was like, well, I got to try these things because, even though I don't eat red meat, I'm never going to try them again.
Right.
So, yeah, I tried several different antelope, zebra. Crocodile was my favorite, actually. That was really good because it just tastes like salted chicken. And wild boar. What else? I don't know. There's lots of, like I said, there's 40 different types.
Nairobi just became one of my
carnivores. Yeah, if it's still there.
Because I want to go now. Like that alone is worth the entire podcast. And you and I have been talking for a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my God, I want to go to this place.
Yeah. And it was huge. It was this huge complex. They had the restaurant. So it's called Carnivores. Like I said, I'm not sure if it's still there. And then, but part of the complex was like this nightclub too, which was hilarious. So I went to Carnivores 3 times for almost a vegetarian. That was kind of, and they even did have a vegetarian menu, which was funny. But yeah, it was a very interesting place.
Yeah.
And I think another interesting dish I tried was in Jordan. My taxi driver invited me to his house to have dinner with his family. So I went, and I'm playing with the kids and the mom's cooking and everything. And then she comes out with this massive platter and it's a goat's head, like the fur and the eyeballs still there, right? And the scalp has been cut off,
right?
So the brains are there, right? And the brains kind of cooked with some rice and some herbs and stuff, but it's still in the head,
right?
And that was like, plus a bunch of other sides and everything. And in Muslim homes, the guest always eats first. Like they wait for you to eat the first bite, and then they start eating. I was just like, OMG.
Yep.
Like this goat is staring me in the eyes. So I take a teaspoon and dig in. And I was like, okay, that's delicious, but I'm just going to have the rest of the other stuff. But thank you so much. Because, they go to all this effort. But Casey actually really liked it. He had a few bites. So.
That's so funny. Yeah, and a lot of people don't get that. But one of the ways that is really, I don't want to say popular, but is common for them to honor their guests and with the hospitality is they usually cook their best meal for you.
Oh, yeah.
And it can be pretty offensive if you choose not to eat it.
Yeah, it's totally offensive, and that's why I had to try. Like, and same thing in Africa. Like, I get invited to all these, like, literally mud huts, and I know that they only have this one meal, like, or one pot of, it's kind of like I can't remember the name of it. It's kind of like a porridge, but it's made from maize. And, I know this is going to last the whole family for the whole day, right? And yet they invite you into their homes and give you like a big bowl of it. And it's so hard because I was only 23 at the time. This was all completely new to me. And, most of the times we couldn't communicate, right? Couldn't speak the same language. So usually what I would do is play with the kids, which is always fun. And then when they give me this bowl of, I can't remember the bloody name of it. It's fine, but it's like I said, it's like a maize porridge, which is not very nice, by the way, either to taste wise. But of course I've got to eat it. But then it's like, well, I don't want to eat all of it because what I do is I eat a little bit and then give the rest to the kids, but in a kind of try as polite way as possible. Because like, oh, I'm just full, you know what I mean? After a few bites, right. But yeah, it was a tricky one. But then I know also that they are kind of a lot of the villagers are envious because they had the Zungus or Ferengis or whatever, in their hut. So it's kind of like a trade-off, I guess. I don't know. It's it's hard to get used to that, especially at a young age. But you cannot refuse. Basically, you just at least have to try it.
Yep. Yeah, it's always been interesting, and sometimes you get amazing food that just absolutely mind blowing, and then other times you're like, oh my God, I hope I can keep my stomach.
Yeah. Yeah. Like in Turkey, I met this Turkish guy and I went fishing with his dad from like 5 a.m, and he just was amazing. He caught so many fish. I caught, I don't know, 10 or something. And then we went back to the house and, the mom cooked it all up and amazing, fish, this is feast basically. And I do eat chicken and fish. I call it my fins and feathers diet. And so we ate this fish, and then the dad, who didn't speak any English, he kept pointing. And Nick, his son, who was my friend, kind of thing, he said, "Oh, you're missing the delicacy, like the best bit of the fish." I was like, "What's that?" So his dad picks up the fish head and sucks the eyeballs out and eats the eyeballs, and I'm like, "That's the delicacy." I was just like, "No." I was like, "Thank you, but for taking me fishing, you can have all my fish heads. You can have all the eyeballs." So you can kind of work yourself, if laugh about it and have a sense of humor. You can kind of work your way out of sometimes.
Sure. So when we were talking the last time, and just kind of like the get familiar call with you, mm-hmm. You have a really expressed purpose in doing what you're doing now. And I'm going to put your links and stuff up and make sure everybody has access to all of the different, social media channels. But tell me a little bit about that as we kind of wrap up here, about your mission and your name and why you're doing what you're doing.
Okay, yeah. So in, I think it was August last year, during lockdown, COVID, all that stuff, and no one could travel, I was like, well, you know what? I'm going to start my own podcast and blog. And then the vlog kind of came along afterwards. But the podcast, because, for years and years, my friends have been telling me, like, Tam, you got to write a book or probably 10 books.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, I know. And I just thought, well, I love telling stories and even, traveling now, my last trip in Central America, most of the other travelers I met were, people in their 20s, like I was when I started. And when we'd sit down and start, talking and, I'd share a travel story or two, they would just be like amazed because, I did this all without modern tech, without flying, and without reservations. And it kind of just blows people in their 20s away. Like, how did you possibly do that without Google Maps? Like, what?
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay. And it was kind of good for me because it was almost like I started the podcast after that trip. So I used it kind of as collecting data and ideas and if it would work, and everyone, said that I spoke to about the podcast was just like, oh my gosh, yeah, that sounds awesome. I'm definitely going to, listen in. And the reason why I wanted to do it a little bit differently is, so basically I take you, like I do it in series. So I'm still on the first series, which is this African trip. So every episode is about a different destination. So I kind of do take you with me on that trip. And then each episode, I give you up-to-date tips in case, so if you wanted to go to that place now, these tips will help you. So it kind of combines entertaining with a little bit of education, with the tips and stuff like that. And so far, my listeners, all my reviews have been great, like awesome. It's awesome.
Well, you're pretty
really
easy
nice
to talk to.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just do it solo, and I just talk like this, right? So I give you that experience. So my motivation was like to inspire, especially other solo female travelers. I mean, anyone who loves travel can listen to it. It's not just for solo female travelers. But to inspire you, like say, and that's why I started with this trip, because it was my first backpacking trip. And I see in, Facebook groups all the time, like, is it safe to go there? Is it safe to go here? Which I just find is kind of, I don't know, weird question personally. But I just kind of say, well, listen, I did all this, way back when. You can do it now. I mean, you can book everything online before you even leave your house if you want to, like literally.
Right.
So traveling is so much easier, but it's such an awesome thing to do. And it's so liberating. And I always think of traveling as the closest you can get to freedom, because you get to do, what you want, when you want, and go wherever you want. Like there's been times when I've woken up in the morning, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to go to a new country today. Like, and I do. Or I've woken up, it's like, you know what, I'm just going to stay where I am and lay in my hammock all day. So I do. It's just awesome. It's very, very liberating. And it's not nearly as scary as you think it will be.
Yep.
And, if you're thinking about it, you're a woman and you want to travel solo, then what I would suggest is just go to either your city or a nearby city or town, whatever, and just do something solo. Go to a restaurant. I mean, obviously with COVID, depends where you are, but, and just try it out, or book a weekend away. Yeah. In the city next to you or something like that. And see how you get on. But
awesome.
It's not nearly as scary as you think. And even now, I still get a little bit nervous before I leave. But as soon as I leave, it's all happy excitement, like awesome.
Yeah. Now, what's the best way for somebody to contact you if they're interested in hearing more of your story, or that they just want to reach out and follow your journey? Because I've got all your stuff and I'll post it when I post this recording, but what's the easiest way to get in touch with you now?
Yeah, the easiest way is probably via my website, because all the links are on there too. It's called Many Roads Traveled. So double L and traveled.com.
Great.
Because that's how I travel, via roads. And I've done many, many, many roads.
Yeah.
So manyroadstraveled.com.
Right? All right. Last question as we tie it off here.
Yep.
What's been the best country you've been to so far?
Yeah, I hate this question. I don't know.
I do too.
Yeah, like it's too many. I've been to 76, and I lived in England for 20 years. I lived in India, so yeah. I mean, that's so many. You think I'd know, but I don't.
Because you end up becoming favorites for different reasons.
Exactly, and because I travel by land, I travel by public transport. I get to know the people and the area better. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I
always kind of feel like my goal is that people don't look at me as I'm a tourist or a traveler. They look at me that, oh, she just lives here. You know what I mean?
Right.
Obviously easier in some places than others, but I'm just like Central America, I absolutely love, because that's just the last place I've been. And I was so surprised at how beautiful it is and how nice it is. So let's just say Guatemala for today.
Guatemala was awesome. I loved Guatemala.
Yeah.
So great. Well, listen up. Guys, her website is Many Roads Traveled with 2 L's. I'm going to put it in the podcast notes. I would love for you to reach out to her. Tamara, I find your story to be absolutely inspirational. The journeys that you've had and just everything that you've been able to accomplish, and the message that it's safe to travel, even as a single solo female. I think that everybody needs to hear that and needs to travel more. So thank you for coming on, and thank you for sharing with us your first epic trip, which is crazy. 30,000 miles is mind blowing. And that you did it through hitchhiking and backpacking and all that different stuff is just amazing to me. And I just can't wait to hear more from you and to watch your story unfold.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, John. It's been amazing. Yeah, been so much fun. So thank you so much for having me.
No problem. All right. Thanks a lot.